Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for clicking. This is Love and Learn with Lissy. And today we're going to be talking about play with purpose. Because when you're playing with a child, it's not just la-di-da. It has to be fun, but you also want there to be some learning happening. So today we're going to be talking about play with purpose. Some things to keep in mind. The first thing, and you'll notice I'm looking at my notes, sorry guys. First thing to keep in mind is identifying your objective. So you want to know where your child is in their development, what skills they're capable of, where they're at, and then you want to look to what that next step might be. So there's that little space in between that you have that room to work with to get them to that point. And so from there you want to know what your objective is. So that's based on developmentally appropriate practice. So wherever your child is developmentally, you don't want to have some crazy expectations about teaching your child ABCs when they're a year old. I mean, there's kids that can do that, but if you really want to focus on that, but you kind of want to focus on the stepping stones leading up to that, because it just makes those things more meaningful all put together. So developmentally appropriate practice is really important. So in a classroom, that's what we would say when we're writing our lesson plans. You want to make sure that the activities, materials, and objectives fit the age of the child and the developmental age of the child. So wherever those children are developmentally. Okay, so we go beyond that. We have an objective set. Now you want to know what your objective will fall into one of the 4 domains of development. We'll have social, emotional, language, cognitive, motor. And that can be fine or gross motor. So your objective is going to be pulled out of one of those. Or you could have, in your play, you don't have to do just one. You could be pulling a few objectives from each of those, and this particular activity or material may help the child work on several at one time. But you want to keep those things in mind. And a good place, I've mentioned this in a previous video, but a good place to look for that and to build upon your lesson planning or play for parents. If you wanted to go online, there is copies of the Early Learning Standards book for children 0 to 3, and that will give you sort of a breakdown of where kids, typically developing children, at what age they should be working on particular skills and when they should be mastering the skills. So if that's something you want to look at, you can search that. It's Early Learning Standards. If you work in a daycare, you should already be aware, or a preschool, you should already be aware of this, but definitely use it as a tool for your lesson planning because it's very helpful. Materials is the next thing. So we talked about identifying your objectives and your goals and the domains that you'll be working on. The next thing is your materials. Now, I get a little crazy when I go in Hobby Lobby or, dollar store. I tend to kind of I like to get creative. I like to find things, make games, just crazy stuff. But you don't have to do that. You can find things that you already have around your house. You can find things in the classroom, or find things to fill your classroom that will serve a particular purpose. I'm a big believer in that you do not have to buy the big, noisy, crazy, colorful toys, the most expensive thing that makes all the noise and everything, because it's about, what I'm going to talk to you next is how you're interacting with the materials. So those toys are fine, but it's about how you're interacting with the toy and the child, and how you're teaching the child to interact with that toy or material. It doesn't have to be an actual toy, but because you can turn whatever it is into a toy. So it's really, really about that connection between the child, you, and the materials. You need to be able to model whatever behavior or activity you want the child to use the material for. Because you hand a child some random material, they're not going to know what to do with it. They're going to throw it across the room. They're going to put it in their mouth. You know, they don't have a basis for what you want them to do with it until you model it for them. So modeling is probably the most important thing you can do in especially a early childhood classroom or with your young child, 0 to 3, because that's where most of their learning is coming from, is observing what the adults and the other peers are doing around them. So it takes a lot of modeling, and you have to show excitement and in the activity and the material as well to try to help them get engaged. A great tip is that if you know your child is paying a lot of attention to like animals or, you know, cars or something with a theme, maybe you can use those items, or you can use something with that theme, like from a TV show, on whatever the material is, or you can tie that into it somehow, and it'll try to engage your child a little bit. Also, sensory, like if you can bring in some sort of sensory aspect, whether it be, you know, a sound or smells or tastes or something with a texture to it, any of those things are going to help draw the child in more as far as engaging them. So try to keep that in mind as well. And they should also be relative. So you want something that's going to engage them, and I think the thing that's going to engage them the most are things that are relative to them. So things that are familiar. You're going to want to use like things, the kitchens, the bowls and cups, things that have connections to activities they do in their everyday life. You're going to want, you know, toy phones, people, cars, because those are things they see, things they're starting to observe and learn about. So tying those things in to whatever you're doing can be helpful. Alright, so we've talked about identifying goals, we've talked about materials, and now let's move to the activities themselves. So the activities you're doing with the materials, because you could have, say you have those little, there's these bucket and there's like cars or airplanes, it's a bunch of transportation vehicles, and you can have buckets of, they're like rubber, and you can have ones that are bears, or you can have ones that are dinosaurs. I've seen all kinds of sets. What you do with those is that you can actually use them. They're a very open-ended toy set. You can sort them by colors. You can sort them by what they are. You can count them. You can use them to pick up with tweezers and to put into buckets. So what you're doing with the item is tied into the objectives that you're trying to meet. So if you're trying to get your kid to learn their, you know, you're trying to go over colors, and you're trying to, you know, work on categorization, or you're trying to work on fine motor skills. Each one of those ways to play with that item are going to help your child practice those skills. And so it does have a lot to do with how you play, and also as the adult who's modeling, you need to pay attention to how you are holding the item, tools you're using to manipulate the item, fingers you're using. A lot of electronic toys, you know, I said before, you don't need those, but if you choose to work with those can be really good for fine motor development, for isolating the index finger or thumb, or you know, working on different grasps. You know, you have your pincer or you have your palmer for the little ones. There's so many things that as the adult modeling, you want to be totally aware of what you're doing and how you're playing with these materials, because the children are going to take their cue from you. So Also language. The language you're using, no matter what domain you're really trying to hit, language development can be happening all the time. So it's important to be talking to, and not just talking to, but talking with your child. So don't just be talking at them, telling them, oh, this is how you do this, or no silence. You want to have try to have a back and forth. Try to get them to make sounds back to you. Try to get them to communicate in whatever way that they can. But as long as you're modeling and they are involved and they're engaged, language development is happening. It might be happening slowly, but it's happening. So, and that's probably my favorite part of, playing with a child. I like to see them try to communicate, and they might even think of some new way to interact with the material that you hadn't have thought of, and be totally open to that. Because if you veer away from, your plan, because we're all talking about you want to have a plan, you want to play with purpose, but children are all about, throwing the rules out the window sometimes, and you have to be open to their interpretation as well. So, which can be really funny sometimes. So today was a very, very short video. I want to make sure that whenever I make videos and I'm uploading them, that they have some sort of actual purpose that they'll serve, something with a little information that may actually help some newcomers to the field. I don't want to just sit here and ramble, but it's something that I really enjoy talking about, so I don't have a problem rambling, but I want to make it useful, so I don't want to drag on and on and on. But I will say, thanks for viewing today, and I hope to make some more fun content in the future. If you guys have any ideas for anything you might want to go over, just leave me a comment. I know I haven't had very many views yet, but I'm new and it's a hobby, so whatever. So thanks again. Bye.